Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Craig, Superintendent for the West Aurora Schools, and welcome back to our podcast for District 129. And this morning we welcome Mr. Kevin Triplett, our safety officer, and really excited to have Kevin on to have some discussion about some of what he does and where he's been and where we're going. So, Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're looking for a really fun discussion this morning. The other piece that I think is as fun, we're going to get into a little more about your role, but you've got your roots here in the West Side. You're a West Aurora alum.
I am. I have my Jayhawks and my West Aurora letter up on my desk.
Can you give us a little background about your experiences as you went through our West Aurora schools?
You know, I came through the schools back in the late 60s, and it was kind of the beginning of integration.
Yes.
And I went to Smith School, but I lived literally 3 blocks away from Hill School, and I wondered why can't I walk to school? I'm getting on a bus and going to Smith School, but you know I would not trade that for anything. I love the experience I had there at Smith School. In fact, I'm going to visit a friend this weekend that lives in Minneapolis that I went to kindergarten with.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What a great set of roots there. So, you talk about Hill. Of course, Hill was our oldest school in the district, probably the 5th oldest, I think, in the state of Illinois, at about 128 years old, built in 1888. As I used to say during our campaign, it was 23 years after the end of the Civil War. And so it had some history and had some challenges, and now we've built a state-of-the-art replacement for it on that same campus. So a lot has changed, specific to Hill, but our district has changed a lot. What are some of the observations? You've been back in the district here for the last couple months now. And I know you have children in the district, and from your perspective and your lens, what's been some of the dramatic changes in West Aurora School District?
Dramatic changes?
Or not so dramatic, either way.
Like I said, Jefferson, West Aurora. I've lived in Aurora, on the west side of Aurora, most of my life, with the exception of my experience in the Army, and I was out in California for 3 years. But I feel like I liken it to Welcome Back Kotter, if anybody knows who that is. It's like coming back home. And it really does feel like coming back home. And as far as changes, I appreciate the emphasis on safety. Hence my position.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate that we have to put so much emphasis on that, but that's the world that we live in today, right? And in order to educate our kids, we have to ensure that they're safe. I mean, our parents are giving to us their greatest resource, right? And they expect them to come home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting caveat to what has been dramatically changed in the landscape of education. Probably even 10, 15 years ago, even though we had Columbine, the complete emphasis on school safety wasn't there until recent years, when we've had kind of a spate. When we talk about changes in how we try to keep our staff and students safe, you are one of the spearhead of our ALICE training, and just how we think about protecting our schools, creating vestibules, and all those pieces that you really never thought you had to do. We used to call our neighborhood schools. You'd walk to school. You didn't have parents having to drive. Kids were just kind of free to walk the neighborhood and the sidewalks, and now we have a different lens.
It's absolutely different. And things are changing. When we talk about ALICE, it might be foreign to some people, but that's acronym for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. That's the principles that we're using to keep our kids and our staff safe. The days of hiding underneath the desk, locking the doors, turning the lights off, they are gone. I mean, that basically what we did then was create a target-rich environment.
You bet.
And we're empowering our students, our staff, to do what they need to do under the circumstances that they're faced with.
Yeah, and you talk about some of those strategies, and we're going to get into the ALICE piece itself down the road, but some of the words that are part of that acronym never would have been a part of our vocabulary in terms of safety for our schools. Just the word evacuate seemed to be counterintuitive. And now it's how do we get staff and students away from that danger point? And so that whole strategy, that mindset has dramatically changed, I think, over the years. And we've had some initial drills. I was part of one of our elementary schools. I think Fern did an evacuation or a Alice drill. And I think that the adults were more heightened sense of anxiety because there wasn't that control. And as educators, we like control, that type A, and we want to know where they're going to be and that they're going to be in a line and on a letter. And it was controlled chaos. And it was, that's just part and parcel of how do we get kids away from danger.
Absolutely. And it works.
Yes.
It works. It has been used. It's been utilized across the country, and it's saving lives.
It's a great tool for us to continue to practice. And as we've been indoctrinated over the many, many years of how safety processes have been, this change will take some time, but I think it's evolving in an appropriate time frame.
And it had to. I mean, law enforcement was kind of thrown for a loop when we had Columbine 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
And we responded to that. We were looking for an answer, and we went to the LA Unified School District, and they had this lockdown procedure. Problem is, the lockdown procedure was in response to the drive-by shootings in the neighborhood when the threat was on the outside of the building. So yes, it closes, turn the lights off, lock the doors, get down underneath us, try to get some type of cover.
Different motivation.
Yeah, when the threat is on the outside of the building, it does not work when the threat is inside your building.
So you brought up the piece, prior to you becoming a safety officer here in West Aurora School District, and we feel extremely fortunate to have someone of your caliber and your background. You were working in a similar capacity at Aurora University, and prior to that, a long stretch with the Aurora Police Department. Can you describe those experiences a little bit and some of your role?
Yeah, I retired Aurora Police Sergeant, a little over 24 years there. As a kid, I never would have imagined in a million years being a police officer. But that's where the journey took me. In fact, I was studying to be an electrician, or electronics and computers, and I saw an ad that said electronic technicians needed, and I answered it, and it was a Navy recruiter, which led me, long story short, into the Army.
Okay.
Got out of the Army, and I came back home, and I saw an ad for firemen. The city was hiring firemen. And I messed around, and I waited, and I went down to City Hall and said, well, you missed the cutoff date, but we're hiring police officers. So I took the police test, and here I am, almost 30 years later.
What an interesting journey.
It has been, but I would not change it for anything. My 24 years as a Aurora police officer, being able to serve in the community that I grew up in, as a DARE officer, gangs for 5 years, SWAT for 16 years. I loved those experiences. They weren't all pleasant,
sure, I bet.
But they have formed to make me, who I am, and they've almost set me up for this position here in the district.
So talk a little bit about that, and I won't ask you to get into the weeds on some of those, but some of those not so pleasant, and some of those, you talk about DARE, so you had some interaction in schools. How does some of those experiences really shape who you are and how you approach your role now in terms of a school safety officer?
Well, the buzz is school safety and active assailants, right? Shooters entering your building. And unfortunately, our city was not. It was a dangerous place back in the 90s, where we were experiencing, high levels of gang violence and shootings and homicides. I remember one year, our gang homicide per capita was higher than Chicago's. I mean, that's just insane. And having been involved in several shootings, I was able to develop this mindset that, man, you can survive this, right? And to know what happens to you during those confrontations, I can share those experiences and prepare people to deal with those. It's not like TV. It's not like Hollywood.
Doesn't get solved in 30 minutes?
No, it doesn't. And not everybody dies.
Sure.
If you're shot, you can survive that. And being able to train along those lines, I think is going to help people. Should we, encounter that type of situation.
I don't know that, and maybe you are of a mind because you went through it, but I'm not sure that everyone goes through those adverse experiences and comes out saying, hey, I've experienced this, I've survived this, ergo I can be good at this and I can impart some of this knowledge to other people. I think some people would go, how do I get away from this? How do I get out of this business? Because this is potentially life ending for me. So why do you think you took the high road approach and the bigger picture approach? That's a curious thought process.
Well, I feel like I've learned that telling your story, it tends to heal. You know, when you experience trauma, you got to tell your story. And one of the ways that I do that is I've worked with some psychologists, and we've developed officer wellness training for officers in the Northern Illinois area. In fact, I'm doing a class next month for NEMERT. And it's designed, the model is we have a therapist, a psychologist that does the brain stuff, and a police officer that's able to talk about the practicality of it, and putting talking about culture and suicide and wellness and self-care, relationships, those type of things, and how it relates to law enforcement work.
Which is a big part of the educational process anymore.
Absolutely.
So if you could, you started here with us in July.
Right. And,
it was something that we thought long and hard about where we were as a district, where we are in terms of, with the west side of Aurora. Is this something that we think it makes sense operationally? What's the role? What's the responsibilities? And the more we thought about it, we're thinking, geez, if we have the right individual, this makes all the sense in the world to give oversight to our practices, but also to help change mindsets. So if you could talk a little bit about, these are fairly new roles in the educational realm. And how do you see the need for that role right now? And then how do you see it evolving into the next level? And then the third piece is, what's your vision? What's the movie in your head about how you impact the educational process here on District 129?
I think you hit it right on the head with changing mindsets. It's a mindset that we have to change, not just in tactics, but in how we treat people and how we get in front of this thing, called school violence. And I have some ideas about that, and I know we'll talk about that in a bit.
Sure.
But the position, when it was presented to me, I thought, this is a chance to work in the district that I grew up in, and I have an investment here.
Absolutely, do.
I have a son that's at West High. My wife works in one of our elementary schools. A sister-in-law and a niece in our schools, and friends that I grew up with. I have an investment, and as our communities and our school goes, so do I. I mean, I am here. I live at West, and it's to my best interest that our kids and the people inside our buildings are safe.
So that's a curious perspective too. You come with a very positive, well-respected reputation. You as a person, as Kevin Triplett, not necessarily, if you separate the person from, your security and your police roles, but you come with a highly regarded reputation. People in general go, Kevin Triplett, good guy, glad he's with us. Do you think your perspective is different because of the investment that you have here in terms of your family and friends and your roots coming up through it, as opposed to somebody that we would have hired that really has no specific connection to our school system?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the investment here, and genuinely caring about the people inside our buildings.
You can't fake that.
It's my goal that everybody goes home at the end of the day.
You bet.
I mean, we have a lot of living to do, right? And I want to see my son come home, my wife, my niece, and my sister-in-law. I want to see him tonight. I want to see him tomorrow. So that is our goal.
Plus, you got some good vacations planned sometime in the future that we want to take advantage of.
This isn't a bad gig. You guys treat me well, and I appreciate that.
Well, we ask a lot of you, so we appreciate it.
Here. It's not like work. I think about things during, when I'm sleeping, not in an anxious way, but how can what can we do to make people safer? To be more comfortable so they can concentrate on educating and caring for our kids and not worry about the boogeyman coming through the door.
Yeah, it's interesting as we've been talking about a variety of topics and related to safety and security. People tend to be afraid of what they don't know about, and so I think the more that we can talk about it and evidence and getting the touchy subjects, get them on the table. Let's just work through it. Even though there's some of the icky stuff that we see and know and do and have to work with and resolve. I think the more we can evidence it and just be very transparent about it, I think makes a lot of difference.
Oh, it helps. And fear of the unknown, right?
Yes.
You just said it. And as we talk about it, I don't claim to have all the answers, but we're talking about it. And if we can talk about it, it eliminates our own body's desire to want to freeze when things go south. And we have a plan.
Well, I guess I blame myself. I brought up the Alice piece a little earlier. And for those that are listening, they probably have a different concept of or a different notion of what Alice is. And maybe they've seen, videos or promotions that it's throwing erasers and, water bottles at intruders, but it's a lot more than that. And so for those that are listening, can you talk a little bit about what is Alice and what's the premise of it? And then, well, I'll ask a follow-up, but let's start with that one there. Just talk a bit about what Alice is and what it isn't.
Alice is a nationwide organization that's created this model to deal with armed intruders in our buildings, not just in schools, but in workplaces.
Absolutely.
And this works on the bus, in the theater, in the restaurants, at home.
Grocery stores.
It doesn't matter. These principles can be used anywhere. But like I said, it's an acronym for Alice: alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. And just in the alert aspect of it, instead of announcing there's an intruder in the building, locked down, we're telling people, we're informing them what's going on, as much information as we have off the bat, so they can make informed decisions about what to do, whether or not they can evacuate or they have to, because the situation is going to be different. As opposed, is there a threat outside your building? Are they coming through the front door? Are they in the room?
Sure.
So your response is going to be different to all those different things, and we're empowering people to make those decisions.
So what would be some of those actions? I knowingly, because you and Marty and a group took us, all the administration this summer, through some of those tactical drills, and we got to practice a variety of strategies. So talk a little bit about what some of those activities, so if that intruder is getting ready to come through that classroom door, what are some activities that classroom might perform? Well,
in your situation and you're in the room and you hear shots fired, and there's an announcement that there is an intruder at door 16. All right. I know I'm at the south end of the building. There's a door, 100 feet away from my classroom. We're going to evacuate. We're going to get out of the building. Now, if there's shots fired, you look out the door and you see a guy coming down the hallway with a rifle. You're probably not going to be able to evacuate. We're going to have to lock down, and not just lock down, but we're going to barricade. We're going to keep that person from coming in the door. And studies have shown if an intruder comes to a locked door, they are moving on. I mean, their whole goal is to hurt as many people as possible. So, and if, let's say there's the threat is inside the room, you're not going to be able to evacuate. Some might be able to, but you're certainly not going to be able to lock down. I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
Sure.
The threats in the room, you have to counter. And we're not talking about fighting anyone. How are you going to fight somebody that has a gun? It's possible. It's been done. All right. But what we're telling people to do is that you have options. If I'm trying to hurt someone inside a room with a firearm, and I have a water bottle, a stapler, a phone,
something to distract them,
a laptop coming at my head, I'm going to duck. All right. And if I'm ducking, it's going to give other people an opportunity to maybe, rush me, swarm me, and gain control of me and keep people from getting hurt. And the key is getting control of the threat so that we can get people in here, paramedics, police officers, to help the wounded. And that's where people survive. The problem where we lose people is when the person is allowed to roam about the building and do what he wants to, and now people are bleeding out, and we're losing them.
So there's two pieces that I think that have changed. The Alice mentality or the Alice strategies are about actively repelling or actively trying to evade the danger rather than just hunker down and be, as you say, be a target-rich environment. And I think the other piece is that the law enforcement has changed their approach as well. You referred to Columbine, where they waited almost an hour for the building to clear or whether they can tell where the shooter's still active. And now they're trained to come in and try and get some of those folks out and provide that response on a more immediate basis so we can reduce the number of fatalities and injuries.
That has evolved over the years.
Yes.
I mean, with Columbine, we surround and we contain, wait for a SWAT team to show up, and people are getting hurt inside.
Sure.
And over the years, the training has evolved from a four-man team. You wait for 4 guys, you wait for 3 guys, 2 guys. It's to the point now the first guy at the scene is going in. He's not waiting for anybody, and you're going to the threat. And I talked to a buddy of mine that was at NIU during their
yes.
the Valentine's Day shooting, and he said one of the hardest things in that situation was running past kids that had been injured.
Yes.
But he was going to the threat. You got to stop the threat, and at the time they didn't know that he had already killed himself. But that's where law enforcement is right now.
And I think, for students and staff to now become active participants, and I think that's what some of the takeaway was, that we can do something about our own safety now. And it's not just hide and hope. It's more, how do we either get away from it? How do we subdue? How do we distract? How do we repel them by either barricading, locking doors, wrapping belts around, whatever it might be, piling furniture up. Mm-hmm. I think we've become more responsible for our own safety as well, to work with law enforcement as they come in more immediately. So I think that's a dramatic change in just how people think. And so my follow-up question is, why do you think that Alice is a better, more effective approach than our traditional practices over the many years?
Well, for one, it's been proven several times over where schools, workplaces have utilized Alice principles and people have survived. The number of casualties have gone way down. People have gotten shot, but very few fatalities. And I think it empowers our staff members.
Absolutely does.
To do what they need to do depending on the situation. And they want this. I mean, our goal is to go through drills with every building, and it's going to be a process. But, 3-4 years from now, as our kids come up through the system, there's not going to be any question as to what to do if someone enters the building and tries to hurt you.
I agree. That's a great point that you make. And you had mentioned earlier that, this conversation isn't happening 5, 8, 10 years ago. This conversation is now almost part of everyday life, especially with your trying to train over 12,000 students and almost 1,700 employees to try and change how we approach this. And this isn't just isolated to District 129 or the west side of Aurora or even Illinois. I mean, this is a nationwide concerted effort to try and change how we deal with violence, and violence in our schools particularly, because we do have a concentration of folks. So what, if you were to give some advice, what are some other things that as a community, as a school district leadership, as parents, concerned citizens, what are some things that we can do to combat some of that? And then how do we continue to make a difference in our school safety?
Combating school violence, trying to get in front of this. I think as parents, we have to be involved in our kids' lives, and that sounds really simple, but just reinitiating that family unit, knowing what your kids are doing, restricting their internet access, maybe not so much restricting, but know what they're into, know what they're looking at, know who they're communicating with, know who their friends are, knowing where they're at. I mean, there's technology, so much of it has been used to hurt us. Just
ask some of those basic questions. Who are you with? Where you're going? How long are you going to be there?
Exactly.
Are there parents
know
home?
Where your kids are at. And encourage your kids, if they see something on social media, they hear something at school, say something. Say something to you, share it with someone that they trust at school, a staff member, and allow allow the school district, allow the police, whoever we need to speak to about this to deal with that or remedy the situation, whether it be bullying or someone's wanting to hurt themselves or someone else, and don't wait until you go to school the next day. Report it to law enforcement when you see it, when you hear it. So important that we get that information like right away. And it's just not us as a district. I mean, this we host a monthly school safety meeting here at the district office,
right,
where we have people coming from Bolingbrook and Naperville, Montgomery, police, fire, school administrators, and we're all thinking and working together to how can we better keep our kids safe. And I'm going to Naperville to assist them in their drills. They're helping us.
Oh, wow.
So this is a unified effort. We're not in this alone. And the whole idea is to have a regional response to threats in our school.
You bet.
And a regional reunification. So if Naperville has an incident, we know what they're going to do. We know what their reunification process looks like, and we can assist them. They can assist us. So it's not. And one of the things you asked me, what do I like about the district and what I see changing, is that this district is progressive. We are ahead of the game. I mean, we talk about things, and people are trying to jump on and glean from what we're doing. So I really do appreciate that.
Well, and that's positive commentary from your perspective, and that's a valued feedback. And you talked about, we spent a lot of time really focusing on active shooters, but the safety challenges that we have when you talk, and it prompted me when you mentioned reunification. It's not just from shooters.
No.
There's natural disasters that take place, whether it's severe weather. I remember one of my experiences where there was a construction backhoe that hit a 6-inch gas main that we had to evacuate. We couldn't even go near our cars. You couldn't have a latch because it could spark the natural gas out there. And we evacuated almost 3,000 people to the football stadium and walked them down to a grocery store lot so they could reunify and put them on buses. So there's, our dangers and safety protocols that we engage in our partners around the community and around the area aren't just because of shooters, but other safety issues that you're engaged with as well.
Oh, absolutely. And the staff, they're getting on board with this. And in fact, right before we met here, I had a question via email from a staff member asking what should be my announcement during an earthquake. We're doing earthquake drills, and I really hadn't thought about that. So I'm trying to put something together and think about how do we respond to an earthquake. An earthquake in Chicago? You think it'll never happen. Yeah, we've had earthquakes. We experienced one several years ago. I remember I was at Copley Hospital and the ground shook. If I could for a second go back to what kind of things can we do to get ahead of this school safety?
Sure.
And one of the things I think is primary, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but is just being kind and taking care of each other. When we talk about school bullying and it's woundedness and brokenness, it causes people to want to hurt others. So if we can treat people the way we want to be treated,
no golden rule.
We're going to get way ahead of the school violence.
I tell you, I'm really glad you said that, because that's something that we're trying to focus on, and that's our culture of who we are and how we represent ourselves. And that comes down to how we treat people.
Absolutely.
Whether we treat it's our kids, our parents, our customers that come through the door, our community in general. As you said it very well, that golden rule of treat people the way you want to be treated. And that's a great premise. Just try and get along with folks. We're our world right now is really disheveled, and people are pushing buttons, and I'm not sure that we have to be that way here. I mean, I think we can make a different decision.
No, and we don't. Obviously, we don't live in a bubble. We don't. And this is a real world, and that's one of the things I love about West Aurora is the diversity. And my kids growing up in the school system, they're going to go out into a world that looks very similar to what they're seeing here at West.
Not too many surprises when they leave here, right?
No, there isn't. In fact, my daughter's been told that as they've gone away to college, and he says, these kids really didn't know they didn't know anything about life. And it's like, Dad, we kind of know this, right? We saw it. We're not really surprised by anything. And they were well prepared to go away and,
That's awesome
and
to
live
hear.
their lives.
Awesome to hear. I'm glad you brought that up. And as we get close to wrapping up, I'm curious, whether it's police work or your safety officer work, what gives you the greatest satisfaction at the end of the day?
Wow.
I'm getting deeper towards the
that is deep. I've thought about this a little bit, and it's knowing that the people inside our buildings are a little bit safer. From the work that I do, the work that we're all doing, that we're better prepared, that we're going home, and I think I mentioned before that there's so much more living to do. Preparing our kids for life to become, decent, good people. That gives me satisfaction to know that they're better prepared to go about doing that, the business of living.
That goal tells me, A, a lot about you, and it tells me, B, we made a really great decision to bring you on board here. And so we're really happy that you're here and proud that you're a part of our organization. So thank you very much for all that you do for our students, our staff, and our community. And thanks for taking the time to visit with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm retired, but people say, well, why are you continuing to work? This isn't work for me. I love doing this, and I look forward to it.
Well, we look forward to your continued work here, or your retirement here. But the efforts that you brought, you brought a whole new thought process and mindset to help us with some of our big initiatives. And certainly, I think people have a lot of faith in you, and that counts for a lot. So thank you very much for all of that. And thanks for your time today. We appreciate Kevin Triplett, our safety officer here for West Aurora Schools. It's an important role, and will continue to be an important role for us. So thank you very much for your time and your insights. And as we move on from our podcast number 7, I would encourage our listeners, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and the TuneIn Radio app. And I would encourage you to subscribe to our broadcast to give us your feedback so we can continue to improve our discussion. So, Kevin, thank you very much. And we hope those folks tune in, and it's a great listen. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Craig.
You bet.